Hello everyone, welcome to Gambling Ramblings again, and in this episode we have the great pleasure of rambling with the legendary Keith Scott Whyte. If you think that term is overused, the term legendary, and overplayed, then normally I'd absolutely agree with you. But when it comes to individuals in this industry sticking to a single cause and persevering where others might just throw in the towel, then with Keith I'd beg to differ. He might not be the most well-known name outside of the US, but when it comes to problem gambling in the US, he's the man in the US. Keith is an executive director of the National Council on Problem Gambling and can be often seen at the Senate hearing and giving testimony whenever the subject arises. He is a bona fide authority on the issue. RG may be the hottest topic here in the EU at present, but Keith has been ploughing a pretty lonely furrow since, well, in online terms, forever. The NCPG is a unique NGO. It's been in existence since 1972, and Keith has been there since 1998. Their job is as an advocate for programs and services for problem gambling, and the one thing he is, and they are, is neutral, and that enables them to work with all the stakeholders across the spectrum. By his own admission, Keith is your archetypal policy guy. We were both presenting at a recent GovRisk event for the Caribbean stakeholders in Miami, and I managed to get some time with him to talk all things problem gambling. And this discussion was meant to be part of a special coming shortly where we get a number of the trade associations to debate the challenges they face bringing the industry together. But the conversation was so enlightening, I thought it deserved its own spot. So, for the next 25 minutes, Keith is both candid and open on the challenges they face, the issues that problem gambling presents in the US, and how brands entering the US can be less than honest or a bust with their RG ambitions when it comes to implementing RG procedures. He's some fascinating things to say, and a bit of a spoiler alert. If you're not taking your RG responsibilities seriously, you may want to turn away right now. Thanks once again to Keith, and welcome to Gambling Ramblings. Okay, here we are in Miami. I'm with Keith Whyte, one of the legendary figures. If you've been over here, you are, and you know it, but it's over in the US, and mainly because, well, rather than me do it, Keith, tell everybody a bit about who you are and what you do.
Well, thanks. I am executive director of the National Council on Problem Gambling, and we're kind of a unique NGO. We were founded in 1972 as the advocate for programs and services for problem gamblers. Okay. And so we've always been neutral on legalized gambling, and that's been, I think, it challenges people at times. They're accustomed to people talking about problem gambling being anti. Yep. And, or there's, especially in the UK now, there's a lot of discussion about if you take industry funding, you're pro. Yep. And we've always, since 47 years, we've said, no, we're neutral, we're in the middle. And so it enables us to work with all stakeholders. I've been lucky enough to have been there since 1998. Prior to that, I was director of research for the American Gaming Association, so I sort of come honestly from the casino side, but never been an operator, a vendor. Always worked on the policy stuff on this. So it's been a fun ride. It's
interesting because I got in. I mean, I'm only 11 or 12 years, but it was completely by accident as well.
Yeah.
Nobody says you're going to get up and go, you know what? I'll go and work in the gambling sector, unless you maybe live in Vegas. I don't know. So tell us about that role, because problem gambling sits front and centre virtually everywhere now, but certainly sort of my side of the pond in Europe, it seems to be driving all of the fines nearly, but it is driving the behaviour and the technology and the data that I deal in. It's driving that. So tell us about how that sits here in the US.
I think it is really interesting in that problem gambling is, as you say, now taking front and center in the social welfare countries. In America and the sort of capitalist side of things, it's a little bit different. Yeah. And so we're watching, we're working with, we do a lot of stuff, especially in UK, because we think that's a really good model. Yeah. But it's being driven partly by fear and by demagoguery, and there's a whole lot of blame and shame going on. And it's what we're concerned about is it almost looks like it's getting split. You're either pro or anti-gambling. Yep. And we think that most people are in that middle. They want to be able to gamble. They want to be in the business. Yep. They're not evil, but there are consequences. And if you don't, and so we're watching right now the limits of self-regulation. So we're watching this play out in real time where things like the FOBTs, we're watching mistakes the industry makes, really reflecting back on them in a serious way.
Absolutely. A really interesting conversation in another podcast with Richard Flint, who was
ex-CEO
of Skybet and now part of the whole Flutter deal, and the bit we were talking about was how he recruited in the north of England for a gambling company. And he said when it started, it was really hard. Then it became easier because it's a technology business. But specifically in the last 2 years, it's just got harder again. As that political pressure mounts up, as the press get involved, as it becomes a political football. So I see that on our side as well. And everywhere you go, it's not... We're just in an industry that's toxic. We're in an industry that's got a reputation that's going to be hard to shift.
We see the same thing. Yeah. They used to attract the best and brightest, because there was a time where no one would go into gambling, and then it became hot. And now if you want to attract the best and brightest coming out and you tell them, oh, by the way, and I'm a gambling company, there's a concern. And I think that's unfortunate. When the debate gets that polarized, it's not good for anybody. And so some of this, the overreaction we see in the UK, we're trying very hard deliberately to avoid that. We are trying to bring everyone together into that middle rather than letting it split into this, pro and anti.
No, I'd agree with that. We see it in society in general. Whether I'm not using the B word here, but all the
that's right.
Around that, you're in one,
or the T word for Trump. Yeah,
exactly. You're in one side or the other, and never cross the divide, and that simply has never solved any problems anywhere. But you know what? I think it's a pain we're going to have to go through for a little. But it's key that organisations like yours pull people into the middle and deliver facts and evidence-based problems of that, because we've been trying to deal with the problem gambling issue now for decades, but it was never, certainly in the UK, it was never based on anything factual.
Right.
It was how we felt. It was subjective. And that's no longer sustainable to actually try and solve the problem, whether it's in the data and the technology that I tend to get involved with, or an operator's view of how they engage and deal with that. So how are you seeing how's that going, that collaboration of getting everybody together?
It's interesting. So our partnership model is based on that, as an NGO and an operator or vendor, together we can devise better solutions than government can impose. But that only works if we get out ahead of it. Once you screw up, or once you decide not to engage with us, because in the United Kingdom, you're required to. You're required to make a reasonable effort to use your data to identify problem gamblers. No U.S. jurisdiction has a similar requirement. And so it's fascinating for us to watch, for example, a European-based operator come over and operate in the United States. Do they keep those same policies and procedures, that same high standard across their divisions, or do they dumb their responsible gambling down to meet the low threshold in the United States? And frankly, for most current operators, it's been the latter. Right. They say, oh yeah, we have to do, we believe in it. It's part of our core DNA, and because we're licensed in the UK. And then as soon as they get to a jurisdiction like the US where they don't have to do it, they drop it all. It's shameful. But because data is power, information is power, and there is so much more that we're learning. So the natural experiment we're watching in the UK, whether you got to where you are in the UK, whether it was good or bad. And I think it was a little both. I think there's some of the stuff that's an overreaction. It is now, UK has become one of the most progressive jurisdictions in specifically in using data and information across all your sectors, including responsible gambling. It's still not core. It's still pretty clear that this is ancillary. It's an add-on. You're not really. It's not key to the business.
But I think it's becoming the whole data and technology is, because that's their most important asset. I tend to bang on at events like this around how KYC, as we know it, is no longer fit for purpose. And KYC should be a full 360-degree view in real time. And now that they can see as helping them sell stuff. That's right. But actually, you can take the same amount of that to both stop fraud and hopefully, as we develop, identify the flags for problem gambling. So I think that there's a slide I tend to use which has 4 quotes from the Gambling Commission in the United Kingdom, and it's all around use better quality data, collaborate across different operators. So I'm seeing changes that end that I wouldn't have seen 3 or 4 years ago. But interesting that the moment they come, and they're not really the brand, because that's the US brand here. They're this more technology partner. It's interesting to note that they'll then relax those policies.
That's right.
For the market they're in, because you would think naturally they'd take that high level best of breed practice.
Yes.
But in reality, you're saying that's not happening.
It seems not to be. But some of it's migrating over, some of it's filtering over. But it's fascinating to watch, because I think at the end of the day, as an NGO, we have no access to this data. We have no access. There are still they're global experts in technology that are in the industry that if they just spent 5% of their time thinking about RG and how to use this data, to help to be socially responsible as well, we could revolutionize this field, because our understanding is based mainly on failure. Our understanding is based on the 1% of people with problems who step up and fight hard enough to get help. Yep. And so then, but they are not predictive of very much. Yep. And so we're not even looking at the majority of problem gamblers, much less looking at the majority of all gamblers. Yep. Because when you look at a data-driven approach, when you look at these data sets, rather than trying to extrapolate from 0.0001% of people, let's look at what makes 95% of people not problem gamblers. And build these models about positive play and social responsibility. Try and load on that more than looking at addiction and failure. You have to do both, right? But there. In the industry holds generally the keys to the kingdom, because this data can be enormously powerful. There are probably indicators and predictors that we've never thought of that if you comb through this, you could. And again, we're saying anonymize it, de-identify it. I don't want people's names. We are looking for broad patterns. And again, many of these things, if you're only narrowly looking at gambling addiction, that's one thing. But as you just said, this is much broader. You're looking at things like KYC, AML, things you have to do anyways. These are not good customers across any number of metrics. And so if it was just problem gambling, you'd still want to do it because it's a regulated industry, but it's not just problem gambling. Looking at these patterns across all sorts of things.
It's interesting because the mantra from the industry is nobody wants a problem gambler. And don't get me wrong, nobody wants the press or the negativity or the addiction that it's caused. But actually, whether they're practically doing anything about it from the right point of view. So it was interesting. We had a talk yesterday from, I don't know if you know Jennifer Cruz.
Absolutely.
And she did the same thing, which is started with the same message: we're not anti-gambling. This is about making that world better for everybody and safer for the people that have developed this illness. And that's the key message, I think, because you can often get where people are, you want to ban it. Now, there's one thing we all know: prohibition doesn't work.
Doesn't work. Yeah. Never has. Never will. Yeah. Well, and I think in the United States it's unique. We don't have a national regulator, so we're one of the few countries in the world actually that looks at this, on a state-by-state basis. And even within the state, there's multiple different gambling commissions. Yeah. In some sense, we've got the land mass and the population, the economy that's roughly the size of the European Union. Yep. And if you think about the European Union states and you think about our states, it's pretty close. I think 56 versus 50. Then within that, though, no one's harmonizing regulations. No, we have about 1,000 jurisdictions. We have thousands and thousands of regulators. We can't harmonize minimum age. We can't harmonize anything else. But our value proposition to vendors and operators is to say, at least on RG, because we will never have a national regulator. We don't have a Brussels. We don't have a UK Gaming Commission. Why don't we try and set up some voluntary national standards that then you can design your products towards, that then you can, legislators and regulators can build their statutes around. I can't help harmonize things like, payment processing and all this other stuff, but at least on RG, we as a national NGO, we sort of can serve or want to serve as a default national standard. It's a voluntary harmonization rather than a statutory harmonization, but as an advocate, because that's at the end of the day, that's a lot of what we do. We have that unique role as the advocate for programs and services for problem gamblers. So I can work with the operators and the vendors. I can lay out this national standard, but then I can push regulators and legislators to put that into statute. I can put that into law. And so we want to close that circle.
Yeah, it's somewhere for people to go to recognize what best practice might be, what the factual basis of the issue is. Because for years, and the decade or so I've been in the industry, everybody's been talking about it to a greater degree, but without any fact base behind it.
Well, and it's not consumer centric. Right now, it's operator vendor centric, it's jurisdiction centric, or maybe it's a national level program, but it doesn't work in most jurisdictions. And so we want to think about what makes it easier for the recreational gambler to have a common set of responsible gambling, no matter what vertical they're in. Whether they're playing the lottery online, they go next door and they play the tribal casino, they go to a slot machine at a bar. They should all have a standard of responsible gambling. And if in doing so, that makes it easier for an operator to say, I can put one helpline number on my product and cover 315 million people because I'm going to provide that national number. I'm going to sit on top of these 1,000 jurisdictions in the United States. And with technology especially, we can do that easier. It's just right now it's a matter of will. And frankly, is what we're seeing in the United States is the limits of self-regulation, because there's zero will. There's zero will to make this happen. And even in operators that come here and say, we want to avoid what happened in the United Kingdom, we say, great, so let's work together. They say, no, we're not interested.
Absolutely. Self-regulation, by the nature of what we're in, just simply doesn't work. If we look, one of the other big issues in various parts, whether it be Italy, Australia, or UK, is advertising. So where was the self-regulation? And don't tell me that we've now got it. Where was the restraint? Where was the control of good? Because what's going to happen? What we are now at the natural conclusion of a lack of restraint. And we're going to get it banned. Now, okay, we won't probably go as far, well, I say we, the UK may not go as far as Italy or stuff. But for the operators to go, well, it's a whistle-to-whistle ban, probably should have come in a decade ago. It's sometimes we just shoot
and now we're fiddling around on the margins when there's enormous public backlash and skepticism, and once that trust is lost, it's incredibly hard to regain. But the interesting thing for us is, so we're watching these dynamics in the UK closely. We're watching our leagues and teams run full speed ahead and do exactly what caused all the problems in the UK. So shirt sponsorships, a big deal right now. Our leagues are salivating at the chance to roll out gambling industry shirt sponsorships. I mean, it would be funny if it wasn't so tragic. It's like they're taking everything that went wrong in the UK, and that's where they're putting their focus on here. We talk to our media providers. We say, okay, now that you guys have, there was no legal reason why they couldn't talk about gambling on broadcast. It was self-regulation again. Now that those fetters are off, because ESPN has failed to set up a good set of standards with groups like us, they are now going to be completely outcompeted by people who now have no standards whatsoever. Because when you don't, it turns out it benefits people a lot when there's strong regulation, because it keeps your competitors from then not only outcompeting you, but then having the backlash that's going to affect everybody.
So I'm dealing with the regulation in Holland at the moment, and the Netherlands, the operators are going, that's fine, we'll do all of that, but you've got to stop the advertising coming in from elsewhere, and that's fair enough. You're playing to be that. There was a really fascinating thing I read the other day about on the advertising front, was around Google are going to start taking off the restrictions they had around that. Well, if we think TV advertising is bad enough, what happens when they're just free for all to go out there?
And we're talking with Google, and they have a very interesting position in this ecosystem. And again, there's opportunities to try and do this better, and there's a lot of pressure though not to. It's pretty incredible. So we look at the teams and leagues, we look at regulators, we look at operators and vendors, we look at data. But again, it comes back to data, because at some point, information is not only power, information is going to be liability. And so if you know everything about this customer, and yet somehow you failed to detect that they are $500,000 in debt and they're keep increasing their credit line to gamble, that is, at some point somewhere, that's going to trip someone up. And it's not going to be one of the big smart guys. It's going to be a fly-by-night operator. It's going to be a shady payment processor in an under-regulated jurisdiction, but that is going to splash back on everybody.
If there's one topic in town at the moment from a UK perspective, and the arms race that's on, the affordability issue, what does it mean that if I've got $1,000 a month, disposable income, and I bet $700 on it on company A, but everybody has 4 online accounts. Nobody ever, very rarely has one. How do you actually work out? Because we're heading down the road of the short-term payday loans sector in the UK years ago, which is, it's no longer enough to know that it's Peter Murray. You have to know that I can afford to do that.
Yeah.
And there's a real arms race. And I think that could be really valuable. And the companies that have the data, they know what somebody's doing. When it's got to be real time, it's got to be dynamic, it's got to be updated. Whereas this whole time stamped, it's Peter Murray, you found me on a database once, that's good enough. We've used that for 10 years.
Yeah.
And it's not going to address the issues that certainly that you're dealing with. Look,
well, it's incredible in an industry that's so dynamic, is sometimes so traditional in other ways and reluctant to change.
Yep.
You know, this was good enough in 1995, so we're going to just keep operating the same way, when of course they're updating their marketing and their data analytics and they're using all this amazing technology, yet they're still stuck several generations back.
Yeah.
It's fascinating.
How do you see that in the land base? Because a lot of the people here are from a casino background who they're not as technologically as advanced, and they take a different view on the understanding of their customers. But they've been sitting through a couple of presentations on AI. Around, I did one on RegTech and stuff like that, but they're almost a generation behind where the online guys have got to.
Yeah.
And it's almost like rabbit in the headlights sometimes.
Yes.
And some of the arguments you get are like when I testified in the US 5 years ago, you're getting arguments that you're honestly going, did you really ask that question? Do you deal a lot in the offline world as the online?
We do, yeah. And we've said, and we've testified before Congress as well, that frankly, online can probably do it better. Because so many of our operators are stuck in this thing that cash is protective. It's not. It's anonymous. You can't identify everybody that's on the floor, so they just give up.
Yep.
They say we do it, and in an online environment, obviously with good KYC, with in an account-based environment with good policies and procedures, you have 100% identification.
Yep.
And so online has challenged that traditional model where it was simply okay not to know who was on your floor. It was simply okay to only identify customers that only spent millions of dollars or this or that. It's okay not to have KYC at all unless someone's a loyalty card holder. Yep. So I think it's pushed some of these traditional operators. I won't say it's changed anything, unfortunately. So you'll see them brag that we have 100% KYC in our online casino, but if you walk into our terrestrial facility,
none of that.
We have no idea who you are. So all of a sudden, all bets are off. We have no idea. We can't enforce the self-exclusion list. We can't do anything else. I hope, and we certainly deliberately do this, we want to push this. If you're operating with 100% KYC on your online, why can't you try and do that on your land-based? I know it's harder, but it's increasingly more and more possible.
And I think the reason is, yes, and I agree, I think there's a lack of appetite to do it, but what gives you hope that it's going to happen is the next generation coming through, the next generation of consumers want a different engagement, they want a different relationship, I think. And the younger generation they have their identity in their smartphone. So they want to be able to walk in and have less friction. And they're happy to trade off some of that stuff for...
Very much so. Yeah. I mean, they would love to be able to have your favorite drink show up at your slot machine, even if you're not a loyalty card holder. And, the technology, I mean, this is probably already there, or it's certainly coming. And so, there's a trade-off. There could be rewards for the casino and loyalty in identifying all of their customers. But then there's also liability. There's also responsibility, I should say, and to identify the person that's been there literally gambling for 36 hours straight. That's got to send up a red flag somewhere.
There's some so obvious. There was a big fine in the UK, and one of the things they were fined for, the customer had, I think, 427 times failed deposit. At what point did they not think that was... Now, the fine was from 4 or 5 years ago. It's just come out now. But the fact is, there's just some obvious stuff out there that you don't need technology for. But you know what? Technology will probably help as we go along. So look, I appreciate your time. If before we wrap up, if there's one thing at the moment that's the centre of your focus, or that you're concentrating on, is there a standout issue you're trying to deal with? Or?
I think certainly on data, it's the advanced analytics to predict risk for gambling problems. So, AI is not going to be your psychiatrist, and we can't diagnose using technology. But what we can say is there are, the more and more we understand about general customer behavior, the more and more we're going to understand about what is the differentiators between, heavy play and excessive play. And there will be markers that we've never thought about, interesting combinations of a failed deposit plus time of day plus. But the more we understand about that, the more we can target and tailor our interventions to just those people who are at risk while leaving the other 95% alone. So we're really excited about, for the first time ever, learning about recreational play as a means of helping us better understand what is possibly problematic, and then working on what's going to help, and then messages, because it's I think the second big thing. So one, it's identifying predictive patterns. The second thing, though, is when we talk about targeted interventions, what is it that's going to motivate you, Peter Murray, if you're a higher risk player, to moderate your risk? Okay. Is it social norms? Is it information on where your plays compared to others, where your plays compared to people that have problems, where you're can we give you risk quizzes? Can we help try and take at-risk players and prevent them from becoming problem players? And so, because that's the active part, right? Prediction is prediction. It's what you do with that data that's the fascinating bit. And how can you make very gentle nudges? We're looking at A/B testing to maybe give you a different color on your screen that you might never notice, but that might help keep you in a little bit more of a cold state. So there's a whole lot we can do with very subtle nudges. Not bam. Okay, an algorithm has told us now, block you as a player, but an algorithm has told us that maybe we're going to reorder your screen slightly so that you see the information on how much you've spent rather than the information on what the latest offer is.
I think there's just a couple of things to finish off, but you're right. I think the ability to identify the norm would help with the ones that stands out from that. And that I think that's where technology can really help. It's really subtle things. It's harm minimization. You're minimizing the chances of it happening, because quite frankly, once you've self-excluded and you are addicted, that's gone.
It's a
medical
completely different conversation.
So no, fantastic conversation. Really appreciate the time.
Oh, as always.
We'll enjoy the rest of the conference, and we'll bump into each other again soon. Thanks.
Absolutely. Cheers.
Bye. Awesome.